Java Constructor. In this lesson, we are going to study about Java Constructor. We'll talk about constructor, default constructor, constructor overloading, parameterized constructor, constructor chaining within same class, constructor chaining in superclass. Java has a special code which runs at the time of object creation, and this code is called constructor. It is not necessary to declare constructor by the programmer. Java adds a no argument constructor for each class at the time of compilation. Let's see a code creation process to understand it a better. So we have created a class employee with two properties, name and employee ID, and now we are creating a method print info which will print the properties. Now we are adding the main method, and here we'll create object of employee class. We'll set the properties, and afterwards we'll invoke the print info method. It's fairly straightforward, nothing new. Now let us go to the location where we have saved our Java source code, and we'll compile it. So here it is, employee.java. We are compiling it, compiled, and now we'll see the compiled code using java p command. And here you see a constructor is added by the compiler, and its access modifier is same as it is for the class. Class is default is having default access modifier, and constructor is also having default access modifier. So a few points about default constructor. Name of the class and the name of the constructors are always same. Unlike method, there is no return type and return statement. The default constructor added by the compiler holds the same access modifier as it is for the class. The first 2 points, name of the class and the name of the constructors, are always same, And unlike method, there is no return type, and return statement is true for all constructors, whether it is default constructor or parameterized constructor. Okay, so just default constructors are not enough, because sometimes it is not sufficient to have just default constructor. A class can have many constructors. One constructor differentiate with another by number of arguments or types of arguments. Let us see another code. Same program with little modification. Here we have declared two constructor. One is parameterized at point number one, and one is default constructor added by the programmer at point number two. So here we can see that a class has got two constructors. Parameterized constructor. A constructor with arguments is called parameterized constructor. When a constructor is added by the programmer, compiler stops adding no argument default constructor. So it's true about the second point is true about any kind of constructor, whether it is parameterized or non-parameterized constructor. The moment you add a constructor, the compiler will stop adding a constructor, default constructor from its site. It is if it is required to have default constructor, it should be added by the programmer specifically. So suppose you have added a parameterized constructor and you require a default constructor also, that means you have to add that default constructor. Compiler is no more going to add that constructor. Now you can have another code example, and here what we are going to show is how to use two different constructors. You can see the highlighted code. One object is being created using default constructor, and one object is created using parameterized constructor. So this is the advantage. We can create object in many ways using different constructors. Constructor chaining. It is possible that one constructor calls another constructor, and thus two or more constructors can be executed in a sequence. Let's modify the code where parameterized constructor will transfer the control to no argument constructor. The same code, little modified. Here you can see the default constructor is, you know, calling this command. So what is this? Using this, the control is transferred to the no argument default constructor here. It can be transferred to any other parameterized constructor also, depending on upon what we are passing in the parenthesis. So here we are not passing anything, so it's going to the default constructor. In the previous code, when the control enters in the constructor, the first one, it is immediately transferred to no argument constructor using this. The rule about constructor chaining is that call to invoke another constructor must be the first statement of that constructor. Therefore, this cannot be written after anything else. Constructor chaining is also possible with superclass. A child class constructor can invoke the constructor of superclass using the super command. Let's see another code example. We have another class, manager, which is extended from employee class. So it's a subclass of employee class. Employee class is superclass for this class. So now here in this in the constructor, we are calling super, and we are passing parameter also. So it will go to the parameterized constructor of employee class. As it was for the this command, for the super also, it cannot be declared or written after first statement. Okay, if you have to use super, it must be the first statement. So super and this both requires the first statement, and that's why super and this both cannot be used in the same constructor. So either you can use super or this, not both. Now a few points to remember. If you remember these things, you'll have fairly good idea of what is constructor and how to use it. Constructor code runs once at the time of object creation. Name of constructor and class are always same. Constructor do not have return type. Constructor can take any of the four access modifiers. Compiler provides a no argument default constructor if no constructor is declared in the class. The default constructor provided by the compiler has same access modifier as it is for the class. Compiler cease to provide no argument constructor if code contains any constructor. Constructor chaining is when one constructor calls another constructor. Constructor chaining within same class is made possible by this. And finally, constructor chaining with superclass is made possible by super. Now, a simple drill to check your knowledge. So, tell me whether true or false. A class can be without constructor, true or false. A class can have many constructor, true or false. Constructor can be private, true or false. A constructor can have both super and this call, true or false. Compiler always adds a no default, no argument constructor, true or false. We can invoke constructor code even after object creation, true or false. Constructor can be static, true or false. A constructor may or may not have return type. Superclass constructor cannot be invoked. Constructor can initialize object and class properties. And these are the answer. Thanks.